What's going on YouTube? This is the Middle School Math Man with a video for you on evaluating functions. There's some function notation. There's also an example, as you can see here, with a graph. So, first problem, I give you the equation y equals negative x plus 1. So, I give you all these x values over here, and I want to know what the corresponding y values are. So, we're going to plug in each x value into our equation, and we're going to solve for y. So if we're looking at this problem, we're going to have y equals negative, and x is negative 3. So we're actually going to have two negative signs there, plus 1, because x is negative 3, but I want to know what negative x is. So negative 3, two negatives are going to make a positive, so I actually have 3 plus 1. Which is going to be equal to 4. So when I plug in 3 into that, negative 3 in for x, I'm going to get 4. Next problem, I'm going to plug in negative 1 in for x, so I'm going to get y equals negative 1. Two negatives make a positive, so I have 1 plus 1, so y is going to equal 2. Next one I'm going to plug in is 0. So I have y equals negative 0 is just 0 plus 1, so y is going to equal 1. Finally, last thing, I'm going to plug in 4 for x, and I'm going to get y equals negative 4 plus 1, so y is going to equal negative 3. So now I have a table. These are obviously points. So I'm just going to go ahead over to my graph, and I'm going to graph these points. So negative 3, 4 is left, 3 on the x-axis, and up 4, so that point is going to be up there in the second quadrant. Negative 1, 2 is also going to be up there in the second quadrant. 0, 1, so I'm not going to move any side to side on the x-axis. I'm going to go up 1. And finally 4, negative 3 to the right, 4, down 3 in the fourth quadrant. And then we can go ahead and just draw a line through those points. Moving on to the next problem. This is very similar to what we just did. It's just written in a different way. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have y equals 7 minus 1/2 x here. So the first number in my domain, we know domain, those are x values. So the first number I'm trying to find is negative 4. So I'm going to have y equals 7. I'm not going to have a minus there because negative 1/2 times negative 4 is positive 2. So I'm going to have y equals 9. So when I put negative 4 from my domain in for x, my corresponding value in my range is going to be 9. Moving on, I'm going to do the same thing, except now I'm going to plug in 0. Negative 1/2 times 0 is just 0, so the only thing I'm left with is 7. Finally, we're going to plug in 6, so 7 minus 1/2 times 6. 1/2 of 6 is going to be 3, so I have 7 minus 3. Y is going to be equal to 4. So given the domain, I now have my range. So again, all I did was I just plugged in each value of the domain in for x and solved for y. Range is y. So now instead of y, I have this fx. So that is read as f of x, or function of x. So when we're looking at a, b, and c, for a, we're trying to find the function of negative 3. So when I plug in negative 3, I'm going to do that for all the x's. So, f of negative 3 is going to equal, again, I'm plugging in negative 3 for all those x's. So over here, this f of negative 3, that number, so that negative 3 is not going to be in our problem. That's just kind of, another way of saying y in a way. We're trying to find what the f of negative 3 is. So we're not using what I underlined in green in my problem. That's just what we're solving for. So when we're solving this, again, I'm looking for f of negative 3. So here I have negative 3 in parentheses squared. So we know that that's going to be positive 9, but I have that negative sign in front, so it's actually going to become negative 9 plus 6 times negative 3 is negative 18, and then I have that minus 4 over there. So f of negative 3 is going to equal negative 9 plus negative 18, which is negative 27 minus 4. So my final answer is going to be negative 27 minus 4, which is negative 31. So the f of negative 3, the function of negative 3, when I plug it into that equation, is going to be negative 31. So we're going to do the same thing with the next two problems. If you want to pause the video and try the next two on your own, now is the time where you could do that. I am going to solve the other ones. So here we're looking for f of negative 1. So again, we're going to plug in negative 1 in for all the x's. So here I have negative 1 in parentheses squared, which is positive 1, but I have that negative sign in front. So it's actually negative 1 plus 6 times negative 1 is negative 6 minus 4. So negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7, and then we still have minus 4. So f of negative 1 is going to equal negative 11. So the function of negative 1 is going to be negative 11. Finally, we're going to plug in 5. So the function of 5 equals negative, in parentheses, 5 squared, plus 6 times 5 minus 4. So again, we're just going to solve it how we've been solving. 5 squared with a negative sign in front is negative 25, plus 30 minus 4. So negative 25 plus 30 is 5. Then we have minus 4. So f of 5 is going to equal 1. One last problem for you. So this one's a little bit more challenging. It takes 2 steps. So my ultimate goal is to find b of negative 1 plus b of 4. So I have my equation. B of x equals 2x squared. So just like we did on the previous couple of problems, in order to find b of negative 1, I'm just going to plug in negative 1 for x. So b of negative 1 equals 2 times negative 1 in parentheses squared. So when I solve that, I'm going to get 2 times negative 1 in parentheses squared is positive 1. So b of negative 1 is going to equal 2. So I just found b of negative 1. So my ultimate goal, again, is to find b of negative 1 plus b of 4. So I still need to actually find b of 4. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to plug in 4 for the x. So here I have 2 times 4 squared, which is 16. So b of 4 is going to equal 32. So my final answer, b of negative 1 is 2, plus b of 4, which is 32. So b of negative 1 plus b of 4 is going to equal 34.